But we're really, really pleased to have you here with us. And this is, in fact, the fifth in our special series. We Praying Together in Jerusalem has been going for about 6 years now, meeting once a month in person in Jerusalem. Before COVID, we found that COVID enabled us to go on to Zoom successfully. And so when we realized that the situation was difficult here in the Holy Land, we decided that we would go weekly on Zoom, and the participation rate has demonstrated that this was something that people really wanted. And I'm pleased to see some of you who've been here for all of those 5 or 6 weeks, and some new people who are joining us for the first time today. We decided, and this was something that was almost spontaneous because of the situation that we found ourselves in, we decided to focus on the issue of the dignity of the human person. And we were asking the question about what it means to be created in the image of the divine. And I'm going to ask Ananta, our guest teacher, to speak to that in just one moment. And our first teacher was Piotr from Poland, Roman Catholic. And we were discussing whether the saint or the religious genius is for us the epitome of what a human being can be, the potential for a human being, and also the fact that humans are flawed. Even those who are designated as saints or religious geniuses are flawed, but it doesn't mean that the potential to do good isn't enormous. And that was the focus of our first session. Our second session, we had Professor Marcia Hermanson, who was giving a Muslim perspective. And then we had also a response by Heather from a Christian point of view. I hope she's here today. And Hannah, whom I know is here today, from a Jewish perspective. And it was a really beautiful conversation. And one of the things that we discussed with Marcia was whether, we tried to dispel the idea that being created in the divine image meant in any way that we looked divine, or it clearly wasn't referring to a physical quality. So it was some essential qualities of goodness, which led us to a discussion that we've been having over the past few weeks. If the divine is good, and human beings are essentially created with that divine, in that divine image, where does all the bad come from? What is that? And that's been one of the questions that we've been discussing. However, we took a slight digression from then with Sister, that Power Sister, I'm told to call Sister like Power Sister, whom I believe is either here or on her way here. I know she'll be joining the discussion today, because she's speaking from a Buddhist perspective, then took us on a slightly different journey about the essential qualities of the human being. And she spoke about our love and our compassion as our essential qualities, and how we need to nourish these essential qualities, and that the evil can happen when we are mistaken and nourish the wrong things and fail to nourish our essential qualities. Last week, we had Rabbi Art Green, who describes himself as a neo-Hasid, giving a very particular Jewish perspective. And he spoke very deeply from the heart about the human. He said it's been a development in human thought to realize that human beings, when we say we're created in the divine image, we don't mean God has a head and God has hands and God is physical, but we actually mean something different when we speak about what it is to be divine. And that discussion led us in several directions. One of them was about the being a mensch, what it means to be a mensch, what it means to see the reflection of the other in another human being. And we also discussed, and I thank some of our participants again, some of whom are here today and some who are not, who also led us in a discussion about what it is to be in war and what it does to human beings when they are in a war situation. when we it degrades both participants, both the perpetrator and the victim, and we talked about that a lot, and we're going to continue that discussion as well. One of the things that we've said in Praying Together, I'm sorry for this long introduction, but I think the context is going to be quite important as we continue our discussion. One of the things that we said in our discussion was that when we chose this topic, because we found ourselves in an unprecedentedly terrible time for those of us living here in the Holy Land. It was the worst slaughter in a single day in the history of the state, and who knows, but it was certainly a shocking day. But we recognized that we are not the only people who are suffering. The war in Ukraine did not suddenly stop because we were in war. The focus of the cameras might have. And there are people all over the world in areas of conflict. And we also recognized, and I mentioned this a moment ago, that we were able to go into Zoom during Corona, but illness and suffering of other sort. I wonder, Elizabeth, if you could mute, please. Thank you very much.
Myself busy.
So we realized that it's not only war and conflict, but there are many other forms of suffering as well. And you know, that these have all come into our thinking about these gatherings and what it means for us to be together. So it's now my pleasure to turn to our key teacher for today, Anantanand Rambachan, professor, who has been with Elijah longer than I have. It is now a pretty long time. Another one of the scholars whose contributions were valued over the years, a professor of Hindu studies and a Hindu himself. And one of the things we also mention at Elijah over again is that we're not only interested in academia, but we're very keen, and I'm pleased to see more people here that I recognize, we're very keen to have what we call scholar practitioners, people who speak from within their faith and not just about a faith. And I think, Anand, this has been something that you've truly touched us from your deep commitment to your faith, as well as your incredible wisdom and knowledge about your faith. So I don't know whether you'd like to introduce yourself a little more, but I'm going to ask you to open the conversation by just telling us, perhaps there might be people here who really don't know at all about the Hindu perspective on the essential qualities of the human being, and whether this expression that we use in the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim traditions about the image of God, whether that works or whether that's an anathema in the Hindu or many Hindu traditions. So it's over to you.
Yes. Greetings, everyone. I am joining you from Minnesota. It's morning here, but I think it's afternoon for you in Israel. And I want, of course, to thank Peter for inviting me on behalf of Elijah. It's a special honor to be with you in this conversation. As Peter said, I've had a very long relationship with Elijah through my dear friend, Rabbi Alon. And I had the privilege of being together with him not too long ago when we both participated in the Parliament of Religions in Chicago. But I have known Debbie for much longer than I have been involved with Elijah, because Debbie and I were friends. We are friends, and we participated together in many of the programs, the dialogue programs of the World Council of Churches in various places. So I feel that I'm among friends today for this discussion. So as Peter said, I will speak from a place of meaning in the Hindu tradition, but I want to preface everything I say with a small note. Naturally, in all that I say, I will be sharing some things from the wisdom wisdom teachings, the theological insights of the Hindu tradition, but I am very cognizant of the fact that I do so, and I'm speaking of ideals. And I do want to also acknowledge, the ways in which, as Peter so rightly said at the beginning, we are all flawed, and my own tradition is in the practice of its ideals, exemplifies all of the limitations of our humanity, that we have also failed and we continue to fail to live up to the most profound ideals of our tradition. So I want to, add a note of humility to all that I would like to share with you this morning. So our theme today is human dignity. And, I'll be drawing from the collection of teachings in our Hindu tradition known as the Vedas. We have 4 Vedas, and these 4 Vedas record the teachings in the Hindu tradition that we regard as sacred, and some of us even understand it as revelation, as coming from the divine. And in the Vedas, the last sections of the Vedas are known as the Upanishads. And the Upanishads are dialogues, they are conversations between ancient teachers and their students. And these conversations center on, all of the important topics that would be discussed in your own tradition, the nature of the divine, our relationship with the divine, and what this means for our life in the world. So we regard the Upanishads as the wisdom section of the Vedas, and a lot of the other sections of the Vedas have to do with the rituals that are central to living a Hindu life. So in order for me to speak meaningfully about what human dignity means for us, and especially to speak about what Peter mentioned as how does the idea of divine image speak to us in the Hindu tradition, I need to just step back a little and fill some spaces for you. So the Vedas, and as I said, particularly the Upanishads, begin with the reality of God. And we have, Sanskrit names for God. The most common one that is used in the Vedas is Brahman, which means the limitless one or the infinite one. So most of these Upanishads begin with the existence of this one. And we have, very beautiful definitions or descriptions of this one. So for example, one text tells us that this infinite one is the one from which all beings originate, by which they are sustained, and to which they return. So this infinite one is the uncreated, indivisible reality from which everything else emerges, from which everything else has come. And so what we also find at the heart of these teachings is that the texts refute the existence of anything but this one before creation. This one doesn't create out of anything else. There's nothing else but the one infinite reality existing before the many come into being. Now, creation is presented or described in these conversations, these texts, as an intentional creative act of this one, who is the source, as I said, of everyone and of everything. But what is, because the Vedas deny the existence of anything but the one before creation, the texts teach that the one brings forth everything, and here we are dealing, with language that inevitably has to be metaphorical. The one brings forth everything out of itself, and so everything that is brought forth out of itself exists within the one, because there's no place other than the one where creation, using spatial metaphors, there's no place where other than the one where creation can be. So everything comes from the one, and everything exists within this one. There's nothing outside of this divine reality. So we have a beautiful Upanishad, the Isha Upanishad, that begins with inviting us to see everything existing within this one, everything wrapped and enfolded in the one. So this is a very prominent theme in the Upanishads, to see everything existing within the divine, within the infinite. Nothing is outside, to use that word, nothing is outside of it. So, but there is something more that is said, which brings me closer to Peter's important question. Not only does everything exist in the one, but the one also exists in everything and in everyone. No one, no thing is excluded. The logic of this claim is that if there's anything existing, and again, I remind myself I'm only using metaphorical language. If anything exists outside or separate from this one infinite divine, then in some senses, the divine would be limited. And at the same time, if we don't say that the divine exists in everything and in everyone, somehow we're also imposing a limitation on the divine. So in addition, along with saying that everything has come only from this one, the tradition teaches that this one exists in everything and in everyone, and does so equally. And we always find there's so many texts that I can share with you where these two points are always lifted up. The divine exists equally in everyone and everything. That is a core teaching that will not be, one will not find that it is in any way compromised or not emphasized, lifted up.
Anand,
yes,
I'm hearing this, and you are leading us back to the where we were last week with Antje. I know you know her. Yes. Our former Archbishop of Sweden, who was
yes.
with us, and I'm not sure if she's here today, but she was making, because what you said so far, I can't see Ellen's camera, but I know she's nodding, and I know Debbie's nodding. Yes. You could have said it from a Jewish perspective, that we struggle with that same
yes.
dilemma, if you like, because we have to use metaphors. But are humans different from other parts of creation? Because
So,
what you said so far,
yeah.
it would make us just
Yes.
not different.
Let me just, yeah, a very good point, Peter. But I just want to say also, before I come to that specific point, that this teaching on the equal presence of God, and the only difficulty I would have with the image idea is that in the Hindu tradition, the texts speak of the equal presence of the divine, not the divine image, but the equal presence of the divine itself in all beings. And this is, just to make a point about the theme of today's meeting, this is the source of the inherent dignity and worth of every living being, because no one and no thing is excluded. The existence of the divine equally in every being is the intrinsic source of human dignity, and this is the teaching that is an antidote to any effort to dehumanize and to deny personhood and worth to anyone else. Now, to come more specifically to your question, Peter, we will have to say that this divine presence is not limited. It is not anthropomorphic. It's not limited to human beings. And if it was, then we would be limiting the divine. But there is a difference. And we are called upon to see the divine existing equally in everything. And there are beautiful texts that invite us to see the divine in the natural world, to see the divine in other than human living beings. But there is a difference. And at the heart of that difference, I would have to say, and that's also part of the human predicament, that while the tradition teaches the equal existence of the divine in everyone and in everything, and this comes with a responsibility, is that as the distinctive character of the human being is that we are capable of knowing that truth, knowing that reality, knowing that fact of divine immanence, and we are capable, and that comes with the responsibility to live out the meaning of that truth in our relationships with others. So we enjoy a freedom, a radical freedom, to recognize that and to exemplify in our lives what it means to know the one as existing equally in all beings. And dignity, what this adds, I think, in our tradition, what it adds, because we do have the language of human dignity today that is also associated, importantly, I don't want to minimize the historical contribution of the language of human rights, but human dignity is also associated with a more secular discussion of human rights. What this teaching from the Hindu tradition adds to our understanding of human dignity is what I will speak of as reverence for human beings. I'll add reverence, I'll add sanctity, sacred seeing. And this is something that is, that a secular human rights and the sign of dignity will not be able to give us. And you can see, you're all familiar with the traditional Hindu greeting, namaste, we bring our hands together when we meet each other, and with a bow of our heads, we greet others with the word namaste, which means to bow before you. And that act of bowing is an act of acknowledging and recognizing with reverence the divine reality present at the heart of each being. But I know there is a second part of our discussion today, Peter, but we don't all recognize that. And as human beings, we are capable. This is what distinguishes us from other beings. Not in any hierarchical. I don't want to describe this in a hierarchical sense that privileges and gives, rights to human beings to dominate and to control all other beings. But the gift of being able to know that divine is the special gift that is conferred upon us as human beings.
You said something in your opening about the flawed nature, if you like, of humans who might know this, maybe intellectually know this, or through their religious teachings know this, but in I guess more of an ideal way, what sort of obligations, how does this change the life of a Hindu or of a believing person to know what you've just told us? What are the repercussions for the way we behave because we know this?
Very good, Peter. So let me. There was also something that you said at the very beginning of this question to me, and it is true. I'm speaking about knowing this truth, but this knowing is surely a meaning. What I speak of as knowing, and a meaningful knowing, is much more than simply knowing the words that the divine exists equally in all beings, or even though knowing those words is an important step. So this knowledge in the Hindu tradition is a part. It's a spiritual part. We speak of it in Sanskrit as a sadhana, as a discipline, and I would say a transformative discipline that changes both the heart and the mind. And only when the heart and the mind are transformed by wisdom, this wisdom, do we see its effects in our relationships. And what are those effects? I spoke about reverence. So at the heart of this transformation is to see the divine existing equally in everyone, in myself and in everyone else. So every human encounter is an encounter with the divine. Every human encounter has a transcendental dimension to it. And this means that it is not, for one who is transformed by this teaching and one who embodies and exemplifies this teaching in his or her way of being, we cannot honor the infinite one and devalue human beings. We cannot give our assent or our support to any social or cultural system that is founded on human indignity and human inequality. So we must also, there is an obligation that requires diligence and discernment in identifying such systems. Several passages in the text speak directly to the question as you formulated it. And in essence, they put it in this way, Peter. that one who knows the divine as existing equally in every being identifies with others in their joys and their sorrow. That when another is happy, I am happy. I rejoice in his happiness. But when another is suffering, I suffer. I become one with others in both joy and in suffering. So to see, I spoke about the humility with which I must enter into dialogue with you. But in my own tradition, we have the problems of, for example, patriarchy, the problem of caste, all of which stand in fundamental contradiction to this deep wisdom. So to see women as less than men, to prefer the boy child, the male over the female, to mistreat the elderly, to ascribe unequal worth or to demean people on the basis of birth and ancestry, to practice violence against others on the basis of their gender, identity, are all in fundamental contradiction to this deep insight that I'm sharing with you. So it manifests itself in compassion, in a compassionate way of being, but compassion flows from this. What this wisdom gives us is the freedom to identify with others. The very opposite of this wisdom is to think of oneself as unrelated, unconnected, isolated from the community of beings. So they're both, I mean, the positive implications is what you are asking. It is compassion, it is care for others, is, contesting hierarchical orderings of human beings that privilege and marginalize others. And I mean, you can extend it also to regarding your community as somehow more important than every other community, or one's nation as more important than any other nation. So these are the ways I think, and I hope I am speaking to your question, but I'm happy to continue speaking if I am not. Peter,
no,
I think
you have, yeah, that's been a very powerful and meaningful answer for me. You know that there are a few other things I'd like to get to, but at this point, I'd like to give an opportunity to anybody who's here who would like to either comment on what you've said so far or ask a question at this point. If you have something that you would like to contribute or a question you'd like to ask, please do use the reaction symbol, raise your hand, because then you'll come to the foreground in the Zoom, and I'll be able to call on you. We still need to be muted until I've called on you. And Elizabeth, you wanted to say something. And then Nazar. Elizabeth, you've raised your hand. Is there a reason?
No, not on purpose, apparently.
No, not on
Sorry.
I think it's Alon who.
It's Alon.
Oh.
Hi, Alon. I didn't know you were here. It's
Hi.
lovely to see you. Alon, and then I can see Nazar, you're going to be called on next, but Alon, please join us. If you've got a camera there, or you don't have a camera.
Since I've had the pleasure of listening to your teaching. So, Ananta, can you hear me?
yes, Alon, I can hear you. Thank you.
I wanted you to tie this question of equal vision and the unity and all.
Alon, you're cutting out. Alon, you cut out. We didn't hear what you asked.
I know, I'm driving. What can I do?
So shall I?
Okay, I'm going to try again.
Yes, please.
I can't type. I'm driving. I'm sorry. I didn't even think I'd be able to make it to this. So I'm going to try it again. The question is, can you relate this to the theory of warfare of the Gita?
Yes. So, Alon, this is a very important question.
Did you hear me?
Yes, yes, I hear you very clearly on
And
this.
and of course it's relevant because it's relevant
Yes,
context of war and human, let's say not dignity now, but reverence.
yes. So
The Gita talks about performing the duties, but how does it fit? Yeah.
yes, so it's a very important question, Alan, and in our context of our times also. So let me start by saying, look, if one takes a look at the Hindu tradition historically, Gandhi privileged non-violence or ahimsa in a way that, while it is quite true that non-injury or ahimsa is a cardinal virtue in the Hindu tradition, in all of its traditions and in all of its texts, it is also true, and you mentioned the Bhagavad Gita, which occurs in the Mahabharata. It is also true that there is that Hinduism supports the right, and there's so much I could draw from to make this point, but I just make the point. Supports the right of communities, nations, communities, individuals to self-defense. Right? The Bhagavad Gita is a good example of that. But Alan, having said that, what is also true, the tradition in this in speaking about the right to self-defense, the righteous use of force, in Sanskrit is the dharma yuddha. The tradition also insists in really impressive, if I would say so, and thoughtful ways that even acts of self-defense must be exercised with care and regard for life and for the minimization of suffering. So we find in the Mahabharata the following limitations put on the use of force for self-defense. One, the text rules out, which I found to be interesting because obviously there were some weapons of those kinds existing at that time, rules out the use of weapons of mass destruction that would cause widespread loss of life. Secondly, we have a very specific mention of those who must not be hurt. The list includes children, women who are not combatants, the aged, the disabled, and those who are fleeing a place of conflict. So in other words, the righteous use of force for self-defense in the Mahabharata, in the Bhagavad Gita, doesn't grant a freedom to engage in violence without regard for the consequences or without regard for the means that one employs. Brutality, Alan, on the part of those who attack us ought not to justify the way in which we, with the right to defend ourselves, does not justify an indiscriminate response. We should exercise that right to defend ourselves in consistency with the deepest teachings of our tradition about what we are speaking about: human dignity, human sanctity, and the value of human life. In other words, and I'll stop here, we are never exempt, even when we must defend ourselves. We are not exempt from being compassionate and from being humane. And there's so much discussion in the text on this point. It is an important thing to lift up, Alan, through your question.
And I know that Nazar wants to come in, and I suspect his question may be a little different. So I'd like to just take this opportunity that when Alon raised this question for you to reflect with us about how you can, self-defense was the perfect example. How can you engage in self-defense and have this protection of maintaining your own dignity and the dignity of the other? Does Hinduism give us some wisdom for that reality, which may be extremely difficult, as you imagine?
It is, Peter. And, Alan referenced the text of the Bhagavad Gita. And what I can say is that self-defense, and even and in the Gita, that defense often requires us to employ violent methods, and violent methods that result in the loss of life. We can't mince our words. You have to properly defend yourself, and sometimes it requires, and that's the context of the Bhagavad Gita, and that was Arjuna's dilemma. But what we can do, Peter, is that even when we have to use force in that way, we don't have to strip the other of his or her humanity, even when we must resist. It may sound strange because, we are not very often in war. War also involves having to stand against the other, and to do so by undermining the other's self-worth, dignity, and his or her humanity. This is the reason why Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita was a reluctant warrior, because war is one never delights in war, even though it is necessary. And that's how I think one preserves one's own sense of dignity. You can have violence in which there is no heart or regard for the other, but in the use of violence, you always have to do it as a reluctant fighter, knowing that you have no other choice.
Thank you. I think that's really important for us to hear from you. Nazar, you wanted to join the conversation. I don't know whether you were dealing with this theme or there was something else, but please unmute yourself and let's hear how you'd like to join in.
Yes, the presenter talked about the Brahman, the limitless one, and also about the understanding that the limitless one kind of subsides in everybody, in every human being. I find it very interesting connection with the idea of Ein Sof in Kabbalistic mystical tradition and Tzimtzum. But in Tzimtzum, which is God's contractions, because the creation is autonomous, although dependent on God, in Hinduism, at least from what I heard, that there's that idea of some contraction or some sort of separation between God and creation, like it is in mystical tradition of Judaism. My question is it my understanding correct? And if it is, then isn't that pointing towards pantheism, which obviously Hebrew tradition wanted to avoid by creating this Tzimtzum notion?
Nazar, my brother, thank you for such a profound thought and profound question, which gives me the opportunity. Yes, and you quite rightly summarized the position that I was trying to share. So there is no. Now, let me say. We can have a session on this alone, Peter, on all of these beautiful topics of conversation. The Hindu tradition, is very, very clear in the Upanishads, is not pantheistic, even though it may be represented as equating the divine with the world. It is in fact not. It's not pantheistic. It's a very explicit concern and discourse in the Upanishads about the transcendence of Brahman. So the fact that everything is in God and God is everything, and God is in everything, does not mean that in any literal or simplistic sense that God is the world. That there's a way of understanding this, the presence of the world in God and God as present in the world, without falling into what you quite rightly identify as the problem of pantheism. So we can share, so many texts that emphasize the transcendence of the divine, even with divine presence equally in everything. So I think, Nazar, and I mean, I don't want to speak in any way for your tradition, but when we discuss these things, we have to see what is the problem that is the text is trying to avoid. Clearly, by speaking of contraction, and that is also metaphorical. I want to say, for me, I will hear that metaphorically, because speaking through the categories of my own tradition, I can't take it literally in the sense that the divine can somehow contract out of any space. It can be a contraction in space and time, given the nature of the divine as an infinite being. But it is to deal with the problem of that you quite rightly identify, the problem of pantheism. But there are ways to speak about the presence of God in everything and everything in God without necessarily falling into the position of pantheism, one which the Hindu tradition also wants to diligently avoid.
Thank you so much. Ellen, would you like to make your comment or add, join the conversation?
Thank you. This may not be the right thing to say, but I have to ask this, and I can't pretend this didn't happen. One of my friends was one of the people murdered on October 7th. Her daughter is missing. Her daughter-in-law is missing. I am having a very hard time trying to see anything human, anything in the remote resemblance to anything good in the perpetrators. I can't even think about them as human beings, because humans shouldn't be doing things like this. And I know, and excuse me if I'm wrong, from a Hindu perspective, certainly during partition in India and Pakistan, terrible massacres and things like this happened to the Hindu, the Sikh, the Muslim community. And I want to ask, how are we meant to look at this? Because I'm grappling with it. I can't get beyond, I can't see these, I can't even say people, these perpetrators as human. I'm struggling to find any way to come to any terms with this. And I realize it's difficult and maybe it's not the right thing to say, but it's in me all the time.
Ellen, I just want to assure you that, first of all, this is a forum where you can say that. It is a discussion that's come up every one of us of these sessions, and I think that it's very, the honesty here is really important, and I'd love to hear whether Anant is able to offer some wisdom to help us. And thank you for sharing.
My dear sister Ellen, I thank you so much. And as Peta said, I don't think any question is inappropriate, and I am so sorry. I'm so sorry for the losses that you describe, and I can't even imagine how broken one's heart would be to lose such dear friends, and to have someone who's held hostage, and you don't know what conditions and what are the experiences of the person. It's a place where it's so difficult for us to even go. So, and I'm not sure, Ellen, that any answer I can give you would be satisfactory, but here's what I would want to say. Earlier, Peter asked me, what is unique about us as human beings? God exists equally in all. What is it that is unique in us as human beings? And I said that not only does the divine exist in all, but we are capable of awakening to that fact. And when we awaken to that fact, our lives are transformed if we truly understand. And true, our awakening is a deep one. But when we do not know that, when we don't see ourselves in each other, when we describe the other as not like us, when we stereotype and we strip the other of humanity and value, which is what we call the condition of ignorance. And that's deep, and its effects are, we see its effects in the way in which we can perpetrate violence against another without remorse, without any compunction or without any hesitation. And as difficult as it is, Ellen, and it is not that I have reached a point in my own spiritual practice where this comes easy to me, but I am trying to walk that journey, that I know that even those who hate and those who perpetrate the kind of violence that you have experienced and your community has experienced, as deep and as dark as their ignorance is, it is still not powerful enough to wipe out the divine presence that is there in each one, even in them. And therefore, part of our response, even though we must resist, as I said before, and we have to defend our communities and our families and our children, our mothers and our fathers, we must also pity them, that they have fallen into this bottomless pit of ignorance, and that their heart lacks the awakening to see the beauty of the other. So we have to resist, but in our hearts, no one is powerful enough to wipe out, to erase the divine presence, and we have to learn to still see that to save ourselves also, Ellen, because we can't allow the others' violence and the others' depravity to so diminish our own humanity and our own awareness of divinity in ourselves.
That, for me, Anant, is the key line just now. We did talk last week a little bit about a Jewish tradition of Amalek, that person who really, really does lose their humanity, and it's I guess a theological way of dealing with that which seems so truly evil. But your idea that we don't, or your explanation that we don't allow the inhumane behavior of the other to weaken our own humanity is so important. We have 3 more people who've indicated that they'd like to join the conversation. So with your permission, Anant, I'm going to ask the 3 of them one after the other to make their contributions or ask their questions, and then I'll ask you to respond. Is that all right with you? Let's hear them, hear their voices. So the first one was Monica. Monica, if you'd like to come in, and Michael has made a long comment in the chat, which we can look at in a moment. But at first, Monica, and then Trevor, and then Stanislav, if that's all right. So Monica first, please. You'll need to unmute, Monica. We can't hear you.
As you have said, if the divine exists equally in any person, why exists the problem of castes in India, and woman is less than man? Is only for a problem of order, of universe, or something other?
Monica, it's a very good question, and I acknowledge what you say. And in my own work, this is something that concerns me both as Peter said, I am a scholar of my tradition, but I work from a place of commitment as a practitioner. And the teachings that I have tried to share with you in a small way this morning, these teachings are the basis that I use to contest, to acknowledge what you are saying, but also to challenge patriarchy, to challenge caste. And this is an ongoing work for me, and an ongoing work for my tradition, to bring religious teachings close to as resources for the transformation of unjust hierarchies, whether these hierarchies are the hierarchies of gender, sex, and for us, the hierarchy of caste is a big problem. But we don't have to look outside of the tradition, Monica, because I think that the highest wisdom of the tradition is inconsistent with such hierarchies. But I must acknowledge them in honesty and humility, and that's part of my work as a Hindu, to challenge such structures.
Thank you. And don't we all, in all of our traditions, have to be self-conscious of the abyss sometimes between the ideal and the way that we live out our lives, and I think this is a challenge for all of us. Thank you, Monica, for your question. Trevor and Stanislav, I'd love to hear from both of you. Trevor first, please. But you'll need to unmute, Trevor, otherwise it won't work.
You're muted, Trevor, please.
And unmute. Thank you, Peter. Yes, just a comment to Anand on the beautiful greeting, namaste. I'm coming from South Africa, and one of the major groupings in South Africa is the Zulu, and they have this beautiful greeting, Sawubona. Sawubona or Sanibonani. I see you, I acknowledge you, irrespective of the color of your skin. And apartheid, you know what happened there? The color of the skin, the way you look, the way you dress, how you are praying, if you are putting your hands together or falling, I acknowledge you. And the response is Yebo. Yebo, it means I see you. It is so significant that when we start to acknowledge each other, then we start to eliminate the divisions that are there between us. And once again, I don't want to go into apartheid South Africa. You know it all, a brand of Christianity that have separated people. The Mahatma Gandhi says, I like your Christ, I don't like your Christianity, because it has put so much borders and divisions and so much that put people against each other. If we cannot just be like your Christ, who have lived out his divinity and showed us what divinity is all about. I'm just going to switch very quickly to Rastafarianism. It says, I and I. It never says I and you, because God combines us as the bond for Rastafarianism. The love of God bonds us, that when I say me and you, I'm putting a division there. I am not acknowledging that you are also under the grace and the love and the protection of God. And when we greet each other in this very beautiful way, even with the Rastafarianism, I'm Christian, by the way, ordained in the Christian faith, but I like these cultural greetings and this very important way of acknowledging each other with the greeting. And that is where we can start every day of our lives, not wait for a crisis to develop. And I want to believe, as a Christian, as a person of faith, that when we start in these small ways, we can eliminate these big crises that puts borders between us. Because when the you and me comes into place, then I have to do something to demonstrate who I am, and do something to demonstrate who you are, and then we are establishing these borders, because borders speak of hostility more than kinship. And the I and I is kinship. The Sawubona is kinship. The beautiful word Namaste is kinship, under the love and grace of God, carrying all of us. And if I greet you in that way, I won't do anything to harm you. I won't do anything.
Wow.
you.
Thank you, Trevor. I'm going to ask Stanislav to join us now,
Thank-
and then we'll hear
Yes.
more from Anand.
Yes, thank you, Peta. And I'm sorry I was late, so I didn't hear everything, but I see how important the conversation is and how much I identify with what the main speaker was saying and the other issues. I want to say something about this most difficult problem that was posed here about, you know, the humanity of seeing the humanity in those who have perpetrated horrible things against us or against our close people who are very close to us. Understand how difficult it is to then to even acknowledge their humanity, and how difficult it is for a soldier who is in battle to see the other soldier on the other side as a human being rather than a goal to shoot or whatever. At the same time, when we just stop at this point, we somehow, as if, you know, we were saying, I am higher than you, than those others. I am human, they are not. And there is this, what they are doing or they were doing is something that I am unable to do. But is it really true that I am unable to do all those horrible things? Maybe I or whoever is here personally wouldn't do that. But some of our close friends or people we know or family members, are we sure they wouldn't be able to do those horrible things in some situations, if the conditions are, you know, that, you know, make them feel doing such horrible things? Are we really sure? If we think that this is imaginable, I'm not saying they will do, I will do, or you will do. If it is imaginable, that makes us, you know, that puts us on the same level. And then this feeling that, you know, we are human, they are not, really evaporates, I think. Thank you.
Anand, would you like to respond to either of the last two
Well,
comments?
I think Trevor shared something very beautiful with us. And I think all that he shared, you know, was in harmony with what I was speaking theologically. So I'm very grateful that he amplified by sharing the traditional Zulu greeting and about seeing each other, you know, opening our hearts to the other. My brother Stanislaw, your point is so important. You know, I've seen exactly what you describe happen in India. In 1984, and this is among people who lived next to each other as neighbors, that under certain circumstances, people who you think are incapable of that kind of violence that you describe become capable of it when they, you know, they accept a narrative, and then the context allows it. And I'm speaking here about the ways in which Hindus turned against Sikh neighbors and the slaughter that occurred. We saw it again, Stanislaw, in Gujarat, within the same community, people who live side by side somehow didn't see the humanity of the other and turned with vicious violence. Even today in India, we are seeing violence against minority communities from members of my own community who I would not have expected. So, you know, we can't, you are so right, Stanislaw, we can't be arrogant about it. And that's one way in which we deal, to recognize that, you know, thank God we are not, but we are all capable of that kind of behavior in the condition of, you know, all of our religious tradition identifies while speaking about the divinity and speaking about Ein Sof, or the divine image present in all of us, also describes a problem that we have to overcome, and names that problem differently, whatever it might be: estrangement, alienation, forgetfulness, brokenness. Somehow the reality of the divine, we are estranged, alienated, and in that condition we are capable, Stanislaw. We are indeed capable, and we must be vigilant.
I think that that beautiful line, we must be vigilant, that we heard it. I'm thinking of Sister Luck, who brought us this idea of nourishing that which is good and making sure to deprive nourishment of that which is a negative force. And she's here, and I'm going to ask her to make a short blessing or meditation in a moment. There's a lot of discussion in the chat, and I just want to acknowledge, because we're going to move now to the prayers part of our gathering. And I didn't know whether Anant, I know you have to go and teach in a short while, whether you have, before we move on, before we move to other people's prayers and blessings, whether you would like to offer a prayer or blessing at this point to share with us.
I surely will. Thank you for asking, Peter, and I will offer an ancient Hindu prayer for peace, to be led from war to peace. And I will recite it first in Sanskrit and then with a brief translation. This is the Sanskrit prayer. Om Dhyau Shanti Antariksham Shanti Prithivim Shanti Apa Shanti Oshadhaya Shanti Vanaspataya Shanti Vishvedeva Shanti Brahma Shanti Sarvam Shanti Shantireva Shanti Sama Shanti Redhi Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Shanti in Sanskrit means peace. May there be peace in the skies. May there be peace on earth. May there be peace in the waters and the forests. May there be peace in the divine beings. May there be peace everywhere. And may that peace, true peace, be our peace. So I thank you so much for the privilege of being with you this afternoon, I would say, for all of you. Thank you, Michael, for your comments on the chat. I read them. I am with you, one with you in your thoughts, and also with Sister Luke. I am also share exactly what you said. Thank you, Peter. Thank you, Elijah, for this deep and honest conversation, which I appreciate very much. And I look forward to joining you again sometime. Peter, I must leave now, so
I was aware that you had to go and teach, and we are so grateful that you've been with us till now, and we will continue to pray. We have a number of people who are going to offer prayers now, and I don't know whether Sister Luck would like to offer a brief meditation, prayer, or thought now, but perhaps I can invite her to join us first. Sister. Thank you.
Thank you. I was very touched to be with you all during this past hour. I learned a lot, and many things that have been shared and has touched me. And perhaps I will just maybe share two things. I really like the idea of being on a spiritual journey, a path. And I want to again say to Hélène, it's okay if right now condition doesn't allow you to see the divine, to see humanity in some people. It's okay. So it's just maybe the time to heal, to take care of the pain, of your pain, of the pain of your beloved ones, of your community. And what you have just done, just to say it loud, just to share it, just to have the courage to just take this opportunity is part of your healing, is part of your journey. So I just want to say thank you for doing that. Especially, you know, I am living in France, so I'm a little bit far geographically. So I'm touched. Thank you. So some of you may not know, my root teacher is the Venerable Zen Thich Nhat Hanh, who was exiled from Vietnam, who has gone through the Vietnam War with the French and then the US. And then he has gone with the episode of the boat people. And he has wrote, so he's a Buddhist Zen master, but he's also a poet and a peace activist. And he wrote a lot of poems. That was his way of dealing with pain, suffering, despair. And one of his famous poem is about pirates raping little girls on a boat. And this poem is saying, I will make it short, but if causes and condition were different, maybe I would have been that pirate, or maybe I would have been that girl. And so again, that has been said by Stanislaw, that who knows? And then something come in my mind. We are talking about, you know, conflict between maybe religion or land, but soon there will be other conflicts with the food, with the water, with the climate change. And so that's why our community is really trying to emphasize of right now we need to really nourish the beautiful seeds that are in us in order to be prepared for something even, you know, is going to be challenging for everyone very soon. And already some part of the world are really challenged.
Rather than think of this war as the war, the common human cause that we have to fight together is the real battle, to fight together as humans for the world as it needs to be.
I would not even use the word fight.
I'm a member of Women Wage Peace, and we use the word wage, which can be a very aggressive term, but in fact it was based on a poem about, instead of waging war, let's wage peace. So yes.
Thank you. So it's cultivate solidarity, cultivate brotherhood, sisterhood. And I live in a very peaceful community, monastery. But if I am not concentrated, the way I perceive my sister, my brother, may be, you know, full of discrimination, very little discrimination. But still, it's a training, it's a discipline to really see the other as yourself. There is no separation. And because the one of the main teaching of the Buddha is where there is perception, when you see yourself as the subject and the other as the object, there is deception. Because we are caught in dualistic thinking, we are caught into I, you, and we are different, we are separate. So it's really to train our mind not to be caught into our very quick and easy tendency of seeing things as separate and we don't have anything to do with those people, or and even with, you know, nature and all other beings that contribute to our life, trees, birds, worms. So we are made of non-me element. If there's no water, if there's no sun, if there's no tree, if there's no, you know, vegetables, we would not be here. If there's no a lot of bacteria, microbes, virus in our guts, and we won't be functioning well. So thank you, virus. Thank you, the good
and
microbes in our body.
Yeah, and it ties in beautifully with Heather,
Yes.
with, Trevor's beautiful thought of how we can greet each other by seeing each other, and I rather than I and you. Thank you so much for being here today, contributing, and we hope that next time we will also find time to perhaps have another meditation with you. It's lovely to have you here, but I need to now to call on Erica, who is going to lead us in a Christian prayer. Erica, please.
Thank you, Peta. You hear me?
Yes.
So I've been thinking a lot about the wisdom of our religious traditions of lament. To me, that feels like where so many of us are. Many of you in the Holy Land are in the middle of unbearable suffering, and those of us outside are watching and trying to figure out how to respond to the suffering in a way that is not judgmental and that is not, you know, not presumptuous. And I think both Jewish and Christian common scriptures in the Psalms offer us wisdom of how to be present in that suffering. Christian tradition in our Gospels tell us that Jesus actually recited a psalm of lament on the cross. And I think that rather than think of that as an expression of a lack of faith, I think it can be expression of our understanding of Jesus as suffering with us, as suffering with humanity, and expressing that suffering that so many other martyrs had expressed. The Corrymeela community in Northern Ireland, or the north of Ireland, is a community that promotes peace and reconciliation. And they say about lament that it provides an honest, active, and nonviolent response to violence. Practices of lament invite us to bring our pain before God, creating space to address unspeakable hurt within the security of God's undying love and with faith in God's desire for justice. The hope of lament is that in acknowledging what is wrong, we might find the courage to right ourselves towards a more just future. And prayers of lament typically have these four components where you turn to God, you name your complaint or your suffering, you ask God for forgiveness or excuse me, deliverance from the suffering, and then you express trust and praise. But I think sometimes we need to just sit with the first part. And lament can also be a way of feeling that solidarity with the suffering of others. So if I may, I'll offer a prayer in the tradition of the Taizé community. And if anyone feels moved to join me, please do so. I'll sing it. This comes from the beginning of Psalm 102, which is a prayer of lament. And I'll just sing it 3 times. Oh Lord, hear my prayer. Oh Lord, hear my prayer. When I call, answer me. Oh Lord, hear my prayer. Oh Lord, hear my prayer. Come and listen to me. Oh Lord, hear my prayer. Oh Lord, hear my prayer. When I call, O Lord, hear my prayer. O Lord, hear my prayer. Come and listen to me. O Lord, hear my prayer. O Lord, hear my prayer. When I call, answer me. O Lord, hear my prayer. O Lord, hear my prayer. Come and listen to me. Thank you.
Thank you. That was so powerful and beautiful. Before we turn to our final prayer today, I'm going to just acknowledge that although we're not hearing her again this week, Fauzi has been offering prayers throughout this series. And last week, when she offered a prayer, and we felt her pain at watching those images of the children in Gaza. And I think it's important that those who weren't here, I know that all of us who were here last week, have that in mind still. And I think this is one of the most beautiful things about this gathering, that we are, and Erica, your prayer now was just so beautiful because it uses the word our prayer, not my prayer. And we are in prayer, even if we're all coming from different positions and different things are motivating us at the time, and we're feeling different. We're feeling different. And yet we're praying together. We are really praying together. In fact, I just want to acknowledge your prayer from last week is still with me this week. I'm going to ask Hannah to offer a Jewish prayer, and then we will go into our, we're going to get into our moment of silence together and finish our gathering. But Hannah, if you would offer your prayer now.
Thank you, Peter, for inviting me to do this. I'm going to read a prayer that Rabbi Tamar Elad Applebaum wrote. She's a rabbi in one of the egalitarian synagogues in South Jerusalem, and she wrote it with a Sheikha Ibtisam Mahamid. So it's a joint prayer between a Jewish mother and a Muslim mother, and it's called the Prayer of the Mothers. God of life, you who heals the broken-hearted, binding up our wounds, please hear this prayer of mothers. You did not create us to kill each other, nor to live in fear or rage or hatred in your world. You created us so that we allow each other to sustain your name in this world. Your name is life, your name is peace. For these I weep, my eye sheds water, for our children crying in the night, for parents holding infants, despair and darkness in their hearts, for a gate that is closing. Who will rise to open it before the day is gone? With my tears and with my constant prayers, with the tears of all women deeply pained at these harsh times, I raise my hands to you in supplication. Please, God, have mercy on us. Hear our voice, that we not despair, that we will witness life with each other, that we will have mercy one for another, that we share sorrow one with the other, that we hope together one for another. Inscribe our lives in the book of life. For your sake, our God of life, let us choose life. For you are peace, your world is peace, and all that is yours is peace. May this be your will, and let us say, Amen.
Amen. Elizabeth, I wonder, Hannah, I didn't know you were going to choose that particular poem, and I'm so grateful you did. Elizabeth, I wonder whether you could just give us now the gallery view so we can feel and see all of us who are here. Maybe I can do it. View. Gallery. Okay. If everybody has the gallery view, it's lovely to see all of you are here, and we are genuinely such an international group. Our comments came, and prayers and teachings came from across the globe. And this is something for which we are very, very grateful. Let us spend a moment together in silence and reflection about what all the lessons that we have learned today. And I hope you feel as I do that we learned a lot today from Anant, and also from everybody who contributed. And the prayers have been just beautiful. And I want to thank everybody who's contributed, both today and in the past. Let's take a moment in silence together. Thank you for being with us. Those of us in Jerusalem and in the Holy Land, struggling and praying for a restoration of something close to normalcy. And wherever we are in the world, recognizing that there are people who are suffering wherever they are. And we cannot allow ourselves to be dehumanized. And we have to continue to see the humanity in the other. We have a number of amazing teachers coming up in the next few weeks. In 2 weeks' time, it will be in 3 weeks' time, it will be a live session for Hanukkah and Christmas. But in the meantime, we will continue to meet on Zoom only. I hope you will join us, and I hope that you will send others to join us and bring others to join us as well as we continue to meet. I cannot thank you enough, everybody who contributed in every way, including those who were listening and learning from Anant and from everybody else. You're all wonderful. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.